Crusader Kings Dev Diary 64 Cultures Are Forever is about the new culture system in patch 1.5 that will accompany the Royal Court. And this will be a free innovation. The issues from 1.4 will be fixed with an additional patch, but that's 1.4. This is 1.5. So it's about culture. What does culture consist of? Of course, the innovations that we already know, being a culture hat, which we already know. But you can see that it consists of more. It consists of an ethos. The ethos is here. That's bellicose. We will go into the details later on about everything. This is just the overview screen, and it's also an excellent overview for this. We have this. This symbolizes the group. It's the Indo-Aryan heritage. The heritage is basically the culture group, meaning it has better tolerance for people of the same heritage. Then we have the language. People understand each other better if they have the same language, and you will be able to learn more languages. More to that later. Martial, that's the option of who can lead your armies. In that case, in the Rajput culture, men only can do that. And then you have the aesthetics. They are probably might have to do something with religion. I don't know. We'll see here. It's further defined by traditions. As you can see, you have here 4 out of 6 traditions. I think 6 is the maximum number of traditions that you can have. In that case of the Rajput culture, we have warrior culture and quarrelsome, probably very much fitting the ethos. And we have mystical ancestors and Khadga Puja. So that means there will also be specific traditions for the countries that maybe only countries of a certain geological location can choose. At least Khadga Puja sounds like that. You can establish new traditions here, 2 of them. You will still have a culture hat, a fascination, and you will be able to diverge a culture. So what does that all mean in detail, step by step, starting at the cultural pillar? And the main thing about that is ethos. Ethos, heritage, language, martial custom, and finally aesthetics. Of these, the ethos is perhaps the most significant. And because of that, it's big here. Each ethos is framed around a particular theme that somehow ties into a fairly broad definition of what a culture is. A culture's ethos not only provides effects and bonuses for having it, it also ties into how easy or difficult it is to acquire certain traditions. So there are 7 different ethoses. There's bellicose, communal, courtly, egalitarian, inventive, spiritual, and stoic. You see, you can roughly connect them with some attributes your characters will have, like bellicose, it's clear, it's prowess, it's martial maybe. Then we have inventive and spiritual, that is probably connected to learning. Maybe stoic is also connected to some spiritual thing. Courtly, communal, maybe connected to diplomacy. But what is it about intrigue and things? So it's not that easy. Let's get further into it. Here are a few examples of what they may look like in-game. So we have the bellicose ethos here, the spiritual ethos, and the inventive ethos. Let's take a further look. Bellicose gives you 20% more mercenary companies, or in that case all Cuman characters gain 2 more prowess. Cuman is probably ours then. Men-at-Arms recruitment cost goes down 10%, maintenance also goes down 10%, and all Cuman holdings levy size plus 10%. So you have better men-at-arms, you have better levies, you have better mercenaries. It's all around very good for recruitment of war. Its culture considers conflict and violence to be necessary states of existence. Ingrained in its people is the idea that one should stand up and fight for their own. Totally understandable. If you like take that as a Viking or as some kind of tribal ruler in general, bellicose is quite good, but also in an advanced game, certainly very interesting bellicose. Then we have spiritual. Spiritual, yeah, of course the church, but there's all kinds of things. We know that shamanism and so on play a big role in the game too, especially with the Viking expansion, right? The Viking DLC. in that case, all Mashriki characters, or all characters of the spiritual ethos, gain piety 10% more, control growth 15% more, faith creation and reformation cost is 20% less. So what can we see? So there's always a bonus for the empire, there's a bonus directly for the characters, and there is roughly a bonus also for the holdings. While some cultures turn to war and others to worldly knowledge, this culture places its trust in the only constant throughout its history, the divine. Spirituality is the only way forward in our harsh and uncaring world. So in that case, spiritual is defined as caring for something, a bigger goal, a moral, an ethos. And that's the ethos. And it helps you with control, piety, and faith. Then we have inventive, in that case chosen by the Anglo-Saxons. All Anglo-Saxon characters, monthly lifestyle experience plus 5%. So improving the character again. Cultural fascination progress plus 15%. That is again good for the empire, and all the counties get development growth plus 15%. Always curious and never complacent, this culture is quick to embrace new ways of thinking or adopt new technologies that others would scoff at. It's a nice ethos. It's a nice selection of ethoses, and I would very much like to see the others. For example, like courtly seems fascinating, or stoic seems so out of this world that I don't know what to expect there. Then we come to the heritage. A heritage works like the current culture groups. The most outstanding effect of a shared heritage is the impact it has on cultural acceptance. So that's the main thing. More details we'll probably know later. Then we have the language. Each culture has a designated language. Languages vary greatly across the map and between cultures. Some languages, such as Arabic, are spoken by quite a few cultures. Other languages are spoken by no more than 2 or 3 cultures. Or in some cases, cultures even have their own unique language. An example of these would be Basque, who really don't have any closely related languages, and it wouldn't make too much sense to group them together with their neighbors. The vast majority of cultures share a language, though, as a sort of language group, rather than a specific language, and they often belong to the same, as you can say, culture group. The characters can always speak the associated language of their culture. They are, however, be able to learn multiple languages over their lifetime. Knowing multiple languages has its benefits and will reduce the opinion penalty of characters of a different culture or county that they have towards you. Knowing the native language of our vassals is therefore fairly beneficial, as it means increasing their opinion of us. So if you have a multicultural country, you should learn many languages with your ruler. That gives rulers that are more like friendly and not so much martial and dread-based better chances, definitely. Then we have the noble martial custom. That now defines which people will be able to lead your army. It splits off that from the normal equality doctrine, as they call it, where in your faith it's defined if women can rule or not rule. That would go together with that martial custom, but now it's split up, so you can have female rulers allowed, but you can also have females not allowed in the military to lead the armies. So that can be split off and further defined. Then there's aesthetics, a collection of several smaller properties for what a culture looks like. It decides what type of clothes the characters wear, coat of arms style, architecture, and the type of armor the units on the map wear. Also a pillar that contains the naming practices, what character names to use if they use a dynasty prefix. Naming practice will also be used to change title and holding names, which used to be set per culture, so as not to have titles change names if you create a new culture. And of course that can also be modded individually. Oh, and with the traditions it really gets detailed and good. So, the meat of the cultural overhaul, because they add so much variation. an extra layer of variety and immersion that can have a significant impact on gameplay. An important aspect of traditions is that they give us a clear means of visualizing and explaining existing mechanics. For example, Anglo-Saxon have access to the Saxon elective succession, or Vikings to the Viking elective succession, for no apparent other reason than they do. Now they have a tradition that grants them the succession law, making it clear as to why they have it. Secondly, traditions serve as the perfect means of giving a culture additional flavor or gameplay bonuses that add a greater degree of variety across the map. A culture can have no more than 5 traditions in total, but there were 6, you say. Yeah, this number will increase as you enter a new era. So it will probably go up to 6, 7, 8 maybe? I don't know what's in the end game. Most cultures will start the game with around 3 or 4, which leaves plenty of room for you to shape your culture as you play the game. As the cultural head, you will have the ability to establish new traditions. Not all traditions will be available everywhere. There are regional traditions as well as traditions that are available depending on your heritage. So to which cultural group roughly you belong. A vast majority of them can be established regardless of circumstances, but might require certain conditions such as hill dwellers, having the requirement that your culture must be present in a country with hills. So regionally bound unlocks something, and I think that's perfectly fine. It's very cool. Traditions cost prestige to adopt. That will be the largest hurdle if you want a specific tradition. The cost of it is dependent on your ethos and how well the tradition fits your ethos. Certain traditions will be more expensive than others, especially if you don't have a matching ethos. Similarly, a tradition will increase in cost if your culture, in the same case the cultural head, doesn't fulfill a specific and thematic requirement. Example would be a tradition named Only the Strong, which is more expensive if you as the cultural head don't have at least 6 knights with at least 12 prowess. Increased cost is meant to act as a softer limit and make it slightly more difficult to establish certain traditions, but not making it impossible. So you want to go and unlock a particular tradition, you can do it if you really put everything to it. Instead of the explaining of the traditions, we're just looking at examples here. For example, we have a tradition called Swords for Hire. That means wanderers gain extra combat skills over time, such as martial, prowess, or commander traits. So the wanderers that you sometimes can hire will be just better commanders in general. Knights in mercenary courts rapidly gain prowess. Very nice. And idle courtiers are much more likely to become wanderers. So you'll have plenty of people going around with their sword being for hire and having just a good time training their martial skills. Available mercenary companies are 50% more, and the Breton characters in that case, same culture mercenary hire cost minus 15%. So you have more mercenaries. They are cheaper to hire, and you have better commanders and knights that you can hire. Very cool thing. Then we have chivalry. That is probably connected to knights, right? Can spar against the own knights in single combat to gain modifiers. So that's kind of a tournament thing, right? Successfully executing a romance scheme gives renown. Failing a romance scheme gives stress. Rulers are more likely to start the romance scheme. The poet and gallant traits give significant romance scheme bonuses. So that's probably the King Arthur tradition. All French, in that case, characters tyranny gain plus 50%. Knight effectiveness plus 20%. So your knights are more effective, but you have to be careful not to gain tyranny. Then we have esteemed hospitality. Probably the Arabic countries are more known for that. Rulers are less likely to have courtiers and guests join hostile schemes against them. And the guest's recruitment cost goes down 20%. And in that case, all Balok characters, courtier and guest opinions, plus 10%. Plus 10, personal scheme success chance plus 5%. So a big help in having guests and courtiers there, and in dealing with them sometimes with the personal schemes. Then we have a seafarer's cultural tradition. The trade port line of buildings will increase control growth in counties of this culture, because it's so important to have a trade port. The trade port line of buildings increases levies in counties of this culture too. That's probably very interesting for Vikings, right? Unlocks the ability to sail in major rivers. Nice. Yeah, definitely. All, in that case, Aurea characters has embarkation cost minus 25% and naval speed plus 20%. So you can have real pirate countries. That's going to be fun. Then we have here the land of the bow. So you can recruit, in that case, Nile archers as men at arms. That sounds like something cultural, connected to an area or something like that. The hunting grounds line of buildings will improve archers as well. And that case, all Nubian characters, defender advantage plus 5. Levy in the counties, then levy size in floodplains plus 10%. And the holdings garrison size plus 25%. Yeah, that is probably connected to the Nile and the Nubian traditions specifically. The land of the bow. Very nice. We have seen a wide variety there. From something very general, like swords for hire, to something very specific, like the land of the bow. There's everything there, and I like that variety. That has always been what I really love about the Crusader Kings games. So then we have the so-called cultural acceptance. Can be described as how well intermingled two cultures are, how accepting they are of each other. Given enough time, cultures will dislike each other less, and culture converting everything within your realm is no longer the only solution to combat the cultural differences. What does that mean? The opinion penalty of being a different culture used to be a static value. Now it will depend on the cultural acceptance between your culture and the target culture. Each culture has an acceptance value of another culture, visualized as a percentage. Depending on the amount of acceptance, the different culture opinion penalty will gradually be reduced at 0% acceptance. You'll have the full opinion penalty at 100%. The penalty is removed altogether. Acceptance goes both ways. So if the French have a 20% acceptance towards Normans, the same will be true from the Norman perspective. That's a very interesting mechanic, that it goes two ways. So it's really how well do the cultures like each other and not the people. These are two ways for acceptance to change. The first is an acceptance baseline, which increases if two cultures share similarities with each other. Two bellicose cultures, very similar, for example. There are a number of different modifiers that can increase the baseline, such as cultures that share the same religion, faith, ethos, language. Most impactful modifier is heritage. If two cultures share the same heritage, they have a significant bonus to their baseline. If the acceptance is above the baseline, it will slowly decay over time towards the targeted value. Being below the baseline, on the other hand, will not make the acceptance increase. What? A bad relation between cultures won't just disappear. Secondly, acceptance very much changes depending on the circumstances. Don't expect two cultures that never interact with one another to gain acceptance. If cultures exist within the same realm, though, it will increase over time. This applies to both counties of another culture within your realm as well as vassals. Acceptance is also reactive. Taking certain actions towards characters of a different culture will have consequences on your acceptance, such as declaring war or revoking titles. So it can become a real culture war. This generally scales on size. While the difference isn't huge, revoking a single county from a small culture will decrease your acceptance more than if you would revoke a county from a much larger culture. So the percentage of the impact, so to say, makes it important. At the end of the day, if you want to maintain a high acceptance and keep your for example, Occitan vassals in France happy, you are at least going to have to try and be nice to them. It makes sense. It absolutely makes sense. If you constantly wage war against a country, people won't like you. And this is what leads to cultural acceptance or not. For example, we have mutual acceptance between French and Bavarian, 10%. That's not that much. What does it lead to? There's a yearly gain here because they're probably friends or something, intermingling in realms, so they're in the same realm. That is the cause of that. There's something subtracted from that. That is the cultural acceptance. It's 5% less, so it's 0.14. They have an acceptance baseline of 10 because they share a majority religion, in that case Christianity, and they share a majority faith. Also the Christian faith, and probably the same Catholic or whatever faith they have in that case, in that game. You can roughly see the Bavarian cultural pillars, a little bit Central Germanic heritage, and it doesn't seem to be the same between French and Bavarian, then martial men only, Bavarian aesthetics, and so on. So this causes cultural acceptance or unacceptance, so to say, and the change of it is made by friendly actions, probably also trade or something like that, towards each other. Now, as a general disclaimer, this is free and I'm really looking forward to that. There's so much to play around with that. It's very cool. Everything will be extremely individual and specific and plentiful, just as the real world is. Hope you enjoyed this. Thank you for watching and happy gaming to you. I certainly enjoyed this. Have a great time until next time and happy gaming. See you soon.